Talk 960, The Patriot, KKNT.
My friends, we all hope we'll never need the services of an attorney. Sometimes, of course, we don't have a choice. This is Dennis Prager here to tell you about William J. Wolfe, attorney at law. William J. Wolfe's practice is limited to injury and wrongful death claims, and although he's been in practice for over 31 years, he is not part of some huge impersonal law firm. To the contrary, when you call William J. Wolfe, that's who you get. This means you also get very personal service. Over the years, William J. Wolfe has successfully taken on many cases that other lawyers have turned down. Now you get the benefit of all that experience. There is absolutely no charge for initial consultation. As I said, we all hope we never need an injury attorney, but if you do, you want one with a lot of experience and one who will handle your case personally. That would be William J. Wolfe, offices at 1121 East Missouri. Hours to fit your schedule. His number, 602-279-1914, 602-279-1914, outside the Phoenix metro area, 1-800-WOLF-LAW.
Now on News Talk 960, The Patriot, KKNT. It's the Middle East Radio Forum. Your chance to talk about the turmoil in the Middle East. To call in live, dial anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Now your host for the Middle East Radio Forum, attorney William J. Wolfe.
Welcome to today's edition of Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolfe, and I welcome you to the show every Sunday, noon to 1 o'clock Phoenix time, which is 3 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, and 10 p.m. in the Middle East. And the reason I say that is the show is available to you worldwide on the internet. Just dial up my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.org. That's MiddleEastRadioForum.org, and you can listen anywhere in the world, so please tell anybody around the world that you think might be interested in the show that they can listen every Sunday. And also, in addition to the local calling number, 602-508-0960, there's a toll-free number, 1-888-960-9696. We welcome your calls throughout the show. Today I have in studio Mr. Oz Rosenberg and Devin Sper as my guests today to discuss the Gaza Withdrawal. Some call it a surrender plan, and also the possible repercussions in the future. And for the random thoughts section of the show, I would like to just share with you my thoughts on the situation. It is heartbreaking to see these Jews pulled out of their homes, the homes that they were encouraged to move into by the Israeli government. And a lot of times these people really had no place to go. They've been put, some of them, into some cheap hotels, and their future has really been put into jeopardy. And I sincerely hope that there will be no further forced expulsion of Jews from their home, but of course time will tell. You will see the world governments continuing to pressure Israel to continue its surrender to the Palestinians. Next on the plate, of course, will be Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank, and of course East Jerusalem. And I think it's very important for all of us to express our opinions to the powers of the United States and Israel, what your opinion on this issue is, because once an area is made Judenrein, in other words, free of Jews by the government of Israel, I don't think there's any going back. Okay, good afternoon, Oz Rosenberg, and good afternoon, Devin Sper. How are you both today?
Good. Nice to be here, Bill.
Okay, Oz, I'm going to introduce you first. You are now 23, almost 24 years old. You live in Bnei Brak in Israel, is that correct?
Correct.
And you did serve in the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, is that correct?
I did. A year and a half ago, I finished my military service.
And what capacity were you?
I was a medic. I started in infantry, and I did my basic trainings in infantry, and then I was called to do a medic course, which I afterwards stayed and was the medic council.
Okay, tell us what happens with a young man in Israel. Obviously, the military service is mandatory. You have fulfilled your service, but there is reserve duty. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct. Actually, 2 weeks ago, I had my reserves for this year.
And how long did that last?
That lasted 3 days. It was a training, but they spread it out during the year, so it's not off for me.
Okay, obviously you were not involved in this expulsion of the Jews from their homes in Gaza, but let's put you in a position where you are one of the Israeli soldiers that is told by their leaders, you have to go pull these Jews, these men, women, and children out of their homes. What would you have done?
Well, many of my friends was called to do the to be actually in the disengagement and to act in it, and they knew about it a few months ago. They were notified about it. A lot of them, kind of got out of it from this reason or another. But I would have done it myself as well. I think it's a horrible thing to do, and I wouldn't be able to do it. If eventually I would have to be participating in it, definitely by far, I wouldn't do it. I would go to the. I'd rather sit in jail than pull out Israelis, Jews out of their home.
Now, there were quite a few that did refuse to do it, and I'd like to know what did happen to them.
Well, as I said, the consequence of not obeying an order is sitting in jail. And
Yeah, I know, but how long? I mean, there's a difference between 1 day and 2 years.
Yeah, there's a lot that got into jail, but mainly was I could say it was like 56 days.
Okay.
56 days in army jail.
All right, doesn't seem too high a price to pay to follow your moral compass.
Well, it is. It does seem like a high price, and usually from my experience, I know that soldiers would get a lot less punishment, but I think because of all the pressure and the left wing pressuring the right wing in Israel, they got because of the press and stuff like that, they got a higher punishment.
Okay, and Devin Sper, you're the author of a wonderful book, The Future of Israel, and we're going to get into that in a minute. However, I've got a couple of calls already, and I want to go to them right away. Bill calling from Sun City, go ahead, you're on the air. Who would you like to speak to?
Hi, well, I speak to any of them, but I'd like to thank you for this great program first. It's a ray of light. You can't find this stuff anywhere else. And I really want to thank Mr. Sper for his book, which I read recently, and The Future of Israel, and I recommend it to anyone who is interested in the subject. But I do have a question for them, and I'm wondering, couldn't this process be an effective plan to shorten and consolidate Israel's border and to include the settlements around Jerusalem?
Okay.
This plan could free up Israel when attacked to be able to strike out against a Palestinian state as a whole terrorist nation, rather than having to search around for individual terrorists.
Okay, let's let Devin answer that question, and then Oz, if you'd like to jump in, just let me know, and we'll have you also respond. Go ahead, Devin.
Well, Bill, it certainly could be that. The problem is it's not. If the government of Israel were to have announced in advance that that was going to be their policy, that they were going to at long last declare a border and react like they should have been reacting for the last 30 years against an enemy, then there would be a certain logic and rationality to this plan. The problem is that they have not announced that, and in fact have not done that. Missiles have already fallen, and they are continuing not to react. So there's nothing wrong with your idea, except that it's not the idea, apparently, of the government of Israel.
Okay, and I want to let people know that Devin's book, The Future of Israel, is an absolute must-read, and one of the main foci, whatever that is, of the book is to establish that Israel should, in fact, declare its borders. Now, Devin, can you briefly tell us why you decided to write the book and what you meant by Israel establishing its borders?
Well, I wrote the book because those of us who don't go along with the Oslo peace idea and have felt that for 30 years it has not brought peace are guilty of not having proposed any counter ideas. And therefore, while we say what we oppose and we say where Oslo failed, we have ourselves failed to say what we stand for. And so the purpose of this book is to give a clear answer to that question. What is the logical alternative to Oslo? And this book lays out a clear, logical, and positive future for the state of Israel, which is different than the Oslo peace process.
Okay, can you briefly summarize it? I don't want to give away the conclusion of your book, but I think it's important for people to know.
Well, it's a hard book to summarize, as you know, because first of all, I have to redefine the problem, which I think is an internal Jewish problem. I really don't think this is a border dispute. And Bill, that is another problem with your question in the way that you phrase it. It implies that the location of the borders would change the essence of the conflict. In fact, I think we all know that the conflict is not about borders. The conflict is about fundamental principle of the right of a Jewish state to exist. I don't think our enemies accept that right, and that being the case, Israel has to not contract, but to expand. And ultimately, she has to expand to the level of a major power. In fact, in some respects, she's already a major power. She simply has to start acting like it. She has to start doing the things which you, Bill, just rationally concluded she ought to do, but has not been doing. And I lay out a clear path to Israel becoming a major power in the book.
Okay, since obviously we've whetted the audience's appetite to read your book, why don't you help them figure out how to find a copy?
Well, you can get the book online at Amazon at www.thefutureofisrael.net, or you can buy it locally at the Scottsdale Kosher Market or the Jewish Quarter.
Okay, thanks, Devin. Let's quickly go to another call. Keith, calling from Tempe. Go ahead, you're on the air.
I'd like to ask Devin Sper to update his views on Israel declaring its borders, and how has it changed since he first wrote the book?
Okay, good question. Go ahead, Devin.
Thank you, Keith. Actually, I hadn't answered fully that question, which Bill himself asked me just a moment ago. First of all, to explain to the listeners who have not read the book, I say that there are a number of things that Israel has to do immediately, one of which is to declare her borders. Most people don't realize that Israel has never had declared borders. And in the absence of us declaring a border, it's only natural that the enemy will seek to fill that vacuum. Now, although we've tried to compromise on the border with the enemy for over 50 years, there's obviously no goodwill on the other side, and it's high time that we simply unilaterally declared our border. If you don't declare your border, you have no right to enforce your sovereignty within that border. We cannot tell our enemies what they can or cannot do unless we declare that this country belongs to us.
Okay, thanks for your call, Keith. Devin, tell me, what do you believe are the long-term military consequences of the dismantlement of Gush Katif for Israel, and perhaps even for the rest of the world, including the United States?
Well, the overriding long-term military consequence is the removal of Gush Katif and the Philadelphia Road, which together constituted a buffer between Gaza and Egypt. Up until now, no Palestinian Authority territory has been contiguous with that of another Arab country. What that means is that they will be, after this is completed in a few weeks, free to import any amount and any sort of weapons they want from Egypt without any Israeli control over the border. Now, until now, what they've done is they've dug tunnels under the Philadelphia Road, and they've imported small amounts of bomb-making material and handguns. Now they're going to be able to import surface-to-air missiles, tanks, heavy artillery, mortars, any amount of weapons, and, God forbid, weapons of mass destruction.
So obviously you believe that Egypt, at least the government of Egypt, would be complicit with the Palestinians trying to get these very heavy weapons.
There's no doubt about that, because until now they have been importing weapons through Egypt, as I say, through tunnels. But on the other side of that tunnel is Sinai, which is Egyptian territory, and it has been the Egyptians through whom at least they are obtaining the weapons. Now, everyone remembers there was a ship called the Karin A, which the Israelis caught, and they were shocked at the types of weapons that they were trying to import.
Those were being imported from Iran, however.
Yes, they were. I'm now, yes, I should have explained. I'm now talking about the type of weapons, not where they're importing them. My only point in bringing up the ship, Bill, was that gives you an indication of the type of weapons that they're now going to try to bring in through Egypt, because they've tried to bring in that type of weapons before through other means.
Now, I assume this would be in violation of the Camp David peace accord between Israel and Egypt.
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, the current Gaza so-called plan, there is no quid pro quo. There is no other side. This is a unilateral Israeli plan in which we're unilaterally removing our control over the border. There is no promise from the other side to adhere to anything.
No, what I was asking, though, is the agreement between Israel and Egypt, Camp David, 1979, wouldn't that preclude, at least on paper, Egypt from cooperating with bringing in these heavy weapons into Palestine, Gaza? with the Palestinians in control of it?
It might. However, the Israelis have already told Condoleezza Rice that it's perfectly okay with them if the Egyptians give weapons to the Palestinians. Condoleezza Rice asked Sharon to give weapons to Abbas so that he could suppress terror.
But not the anti-aircraft missiles that you're talking about earlier.
Yes, but once you've established the principle that Egypt can give weapons to the Palestinians, and once you don't control the border and know what's inside that truck, there is no practical way of stopping it. I think it's very obvious that they're going to be importing heavy weapons.
Okay. What do you believe the long-term effects of the expulsion will be on the Palestinian Arabs?
Well, first of all, it encourages terror. If you encourage bad behavior, you can expect more of the same. Rather than paying a penalty for the Intifada and years of suicide bombings and Qassam rocket attacks on Israeli civilians, they're being rewarded for it with terror and with land. And they're getting all of the land that they wanted, every inch, which means also that they have no motive in the future to compromise because they've been given everything they want in exchange for nothing.
And in fact, they do say that they have liberated the land of Gaza through their terrorism. And quite frankly, I think they would be right.
Yes, Hamas.
Because if they're living in peace with the Israelis, there never would have been an expulsion. Okay, we are coming up on the first break of the hour. My name is William Wolf. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on News Talk 960 The Patriot. In studio today, I have a 23-year-old Israeli, Oz Rosenberg, and I have also Devin Sper, author of a very excellent book called The Future of Israel. And I do ask my listeners to please utilize the services of my advertisers and please tell them that you heard about them on this program. That is how this show is brought to you. Please stay with us. We'll be right back after the break.
Start this year right with a well-trusted accounting firm here in the Valley, Nelson & Robles PC, certified public accountants in the Valley since 1977. Nelson & Robles PC specialize in monthly accounting and tax preparations for all types of businesses, as well as individuals, trusts, and estates. If you have an accounting or tax need, then call Nelson & Robles PC today at 602-944-4242. That's Nelson & Robles PC, a trusted Valley accounting firm since 1977. 602-944-4242. Call today. For those of you who savor a taste of the Middle East, you'll be happy to know that all the flavors and all the savory aromas of traditional Israeli home cooking can now be found right here in the Valley at Sabuti Israeli Restaurant, corner of University and Hardy in Tempe. At Sabuti Israeli Restaurant, you'll enjoy all your favorites, including falafel, shawarma, hummus, kebabs, and chicken schnitzel. Sabuti also features a variety of vegetarian specials. Stop by for lunch or dinner and say hi to the owner, Danny. Then sit down to an unforgettable dining experience you'll want to enjoy again and again. By the way, be sure to bring along family or friends because Sabuti Israeli Restaurant is something that's too good to keep to yourself. For lunch and dinner, Monday through Saturday, it's Sabuti Israeli Restaurant, southeast corner of University and Hardy in Tempe.
Jewish News of Greater Phoenix is your source for timely news and information about the Jewish community in the Valley and around the world. Our family-owned and operated weekly newspaper has been serving Valley readers for 57 years. To subscribe to Jewish News, call 602-870-9470 or visit www.jewishaz.com. That number again is 602-870-9470 or jewishaz.com.
If you're looking for a complete quality computer service company that is knowledgeable, reliable, professional, and fast, you need Ultimate Computer Concepts of Phoenix. We offer service and support for all of your computer needs, and we've been serving the Valley for over 10 years, specializing in computer systems and software, internet service, security, networking, and website hosting and development. Call 602-230-4747 or visit us online at uccinc.net.
As an attorney, I get to know who the experts are in every related field. That's how I came to know Dr. Roger Baker. Dr. Baker is a board-certified chiropractic physician who handles accident injuries. His modern office provides every form of up-to-date healing and pain-relieving therapy, including acupuncture for pain relief and digestion aid. Dr. Baker stays on top of what's new so that his patients have the latest advances in care. Take it from me, you're in the right hands with Dr. Roger Baker. That's Dr. Roger Baker, 602-249-4508.
Buying or selling a home? Let Mary Beth Smith make your life easier. She's been a realtor for 18 years and is a certified residential specialist with Realty Executives. Let her show you what her personal service can do for you. Mary Beth has lived in North Phoenix for 30 years but works throughout the Phoenix metro area. Give her a call at 602-434-2900 or visit azqualityhomes.com. That's Mary Beth Smith. Let her expertise work for you. Call her today at 602-434-2900.
Whenever I pass the corner of 7th Street in Maryland, it's hard to resist making a quick stop at the Maryland Deli and Mini Mart. If I need a cup of coffee, it's always fresh. If I'm in the mood for iced tea, they serve the best China Mist. If I'm hungry, they make the freshest deli sandwiches around with boar's head meats, of course. For a quick treat, they've got Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Need gas? Use your Shell card or their ATM. Open 7 days a week from 5 to 11. The place is always clean and attractive. Seems like there are mini marts on every corner, but there's only one Maryland Deli and Mini Mart, corner of 7th Street in Maryland.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on News Talk 960 The Patriot, KKNT. To join in the conversation, call in anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Now, back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf. The show is available to you every Sunday, noon to 1 o'clock in Arizona. And if you're listening out of state, just adjust the time for your time zone. 3 o'clock on the East Coast to help you out. We have in studio Oz Rosenberg, an Israeli, 23 years old, who is visiting from Israel, who recently completed some military service, and also Devin Sper, author of the book, The Future of Israel. And we're having a lively discussion here. Before we get back to Devin, I, however, want to take a long-distance call. David, calling from Skokie, Illinois. Go ahead, you're on the air.
I'd like to know, I know that along with the withdrawal of the settlements from Gaza, there were also 4 settlements in the West Bank that were also evacuated or in the process of being evacuated. I'm wondering what the reasoning of the Israeli government was behind these 4 settlements being evacuated as well, and it would seem as if this also would give momentum to maybe some of the terrorist groups thinking that, well, hey, this is obviously the West Bank is next, since they're already beginning to withdraw from there.
Well, of course, I appreciate the question, but the vocabulary, I prefer Judea and Samaria, because that is what Israelis should call it, the West Bank. I'm not even sure what it means. How large is the West Bank of a river, the Jordan River? But in any event, we know what you're talking about. Devin, go ahead, please.
I think the answer to that question, David, is clear. I think the government of Israel wanted to set precisely that precedent and to show that this was not going to be limited to Gaza, but that it would continue into the West Bank, and they've already set the precedent. It is not only our enemies who might conclude that, but we might conclude that. And the government of Israel has said as much. Vice Prime Minister Ulmart has said that they will continue into other settlements, starting with what they call the illegal settlements. So we're not talking here simply about the ethnic cleansing of 8,000 Jews from Gaza. We're talking about the ethnic cleansing of 250,000 Jews from the West Bank.
Okay, David, any follow-up? Okay.
No, that's fine.
Okay, thanks for your call. That was a good question. Devin, I want to get back to what you were talking about before the first break. And aside to the reward to terrorism, which we discussed just before we went to the break, how will this expulsion affect the Palestinians in general?
Well, let's talk first about the Palestinians in Gaza. They are now going to be under Hamas rule, because in fact it's not the Palestinian Authority which has authority in Gaza or control, it's Hamas. So even if there were moderate voices among the Palestinians or people who want peace with Israel, they are going to have no voice. This is not going to be a democracy. This is going to be a terrorist state, much like the state that the Taliban ran in Afghanistan.
Are these the people that would publicly execute other Palestinians for suspected collaboration with Israel?
Absolutely. That's the kind of regime you can expect to see. So that this actually closes the door for any real peace between the people in Gaza and the Israeli people.
So what about the average Palestinian who's just trying to make a living and support his family? How does this affect him?
I was just in Israel. I took a taxi ride with a Palestinian taxi driver who was a thoroughly decent person of the sort that you're talking. He wanted to make a living for his family. He was not terribly political. And he understood and told me himself that he realizes that the destruction of the Palestinian economy, the destruction of their civil society is their own fault. And he does not blame Israel. He blames themselves and their own leadership.
Okay, Oz, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to say that this is one of the differences between the first Intifada and this one. That the first Intifada was driven by depression, that so-called depression that the Palestinians felt, and this one is more of a religious one, and that's why the Hamas is going to be the actual future leader of the Palestinian territories, because most Palestinians through the last decade has moved toward the religious way, and that's why Abu Mazen, which is he represents the secular Palestinian Authority, won't get too much support from the Palestinian street.
How do you, either one can answer this question, how do you feel that the world is going to be perceiving what's going to be going on internally within Gaza with this conflict between the Hamas and the Palestinian Authority?
Go ahead.
Okay, Devin, go ahead, please.
How the outside world will see it?
Yes, what will they see? What will be disseminated to the outside world from the news agencies?
The news agencies will do their level best to ignore that, because there is no longer the canard of Israeli occupation, and therefore they're going to be hard-pressed to explain the bloodshed in the streets of Gaza, the continuous attacks. Although let me just say that their tactic will be at first to be relatively quiet vis-a-vis Israel from Gaza, because they want to give the impression that if you withdraw from territory, it will be quiet. And so the attacks will start up very soon, but from the West Bank rather than Gaza.
And already started.
Actually already started from Gaza. So it's even questionable whether they can control themselves. But their tactic will be, as much as possible, to focus on the West Bank. And this is not my opinion. The head of Hamas, Mashal, said so in Syria last week.
Do the outside governments of the world, do they ever listen to what is being said by the terrorists? In other words, they say they're going to continue the terror to continue to get more land, and what they're talking about, more land, is all the land of Israel, Tel Aviv, Haifa, everything.
If they were listening, Bill, to what the Palestinians have been saying clearly and unambiguously for the last 30 years, there would have been no Oslo peace process. They would have not given Arafat a state. They would have not given him 40,000 rifles. The whole point and the whole problem with Oslo, as well as this Gaza plan, it is a self-delusion. And self-delusion by nature does not deal with reality.
Okay. Tell me, neither one can answer the question first. The government of Israel has obviously allowed this expulsion. In fact, they're the ones that have done the expulsion from Gaza. What gives us here in the United States the right to even talk about it, to criticize what the Israeli government is doing? And we're coming up on break shortly, but I'll let you get started on the answer. Devin, go ahead.
First of all, we as human beings and as Jews have the right to question anything which we feel is immoral, and it doesn't matter who does it. The fact that this particular expulsion of Jews was carried out by the Israeli government has a lot of people confused, but I would say to those people, what would you feel and what would you say if this was any other government in the world throwing 8,000 Jews out of their house simply because they're Jews? Because these people are farmers, they're peaceful, they've done nothing to anybody, and we would condemn that. We would not accept it. We should not accept it from Israel.
Okay, Oz, I'm going to let you get into it, but after the break, we are coming up on break. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum here on News Talk 960 The Patriot. My name is William Wolf. The show is available to you every Sunday, noon to 1 o'clock Arizona time, broadcast here in the Phoenix area, with a show being available worldwide on the internet. Just have anybody who might be interested pull up my website, MiddleEastRadioForum.org. That's MiddleEastRadioForum.org, where you can also listen to some old shows, even if you're here in Phoenix. Just pull up the website, click on the archives, and you can scroll through a whole bunch of old shows to listen whenever you like. The show is also brought to you by Bethel Congregation, 1118 West Glendale in Phoenix, where a warm Sabbath experience is available to you every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. Make Bethel your spiritual home away from home. Please stay with us. We'll be right back after the break with Oz Rosenberg and Devin Sper.
Tucked away at the northeast corner of 7th Street in Missouri is that kosher-style New York, Chicago deli you've been looking for ever since you moved to the Valley. Scott's Generations. It's just like home. From the complete breakfast, lunch, and dinner menu to the family pictures on the wall. Carryouts? Of course. Catering? Yes. Stop by, say hi to your hosts Scott and Jean, and pick up a dozen bagels or bialys and get a half dozen free. Your favorite deli from back east is as close as Scott's Generations, 5539 North 7th Street at Missouri. For free delivery, call 277-5662.
This is William J. Wolf to tell you about my favorite Italian restaurant. Sometimes you just want to relax and be indulged. The attentive staff at Christo's Restaurant is available to meet your fine dining needs for dinner Monday through Saturday until 10 p.m. and Monday through Friday for lunch. Let them pamper you with mouth-watering Northern Italian continental cuisine. Christo specializes in fresh seafood, veal, chicken, ossobuco, and pasta dishes that will have you looking forward to your next visit. Enjoy your favorite beverage, a wonderful lunch or dinner, and an unforgettable dessert. And they do the dishes. They are the official Italian restaurant of Middle East Radio Forum. I love their eggplant parmesan and their fish dishes. I'm sure you will have your favorites too. That's Christo's Restaurant, serving great food for 18 years at 6327 North 7th Street. Call them for reservations at 602-264-1784. That's Christo's Restaurant, 602-264-1784. Tell them William Wolf sent you there.
Estate planning. It's something you know in the back of your mind that you ought to be doing, but you just haven't gotten around to it yet, right? Well, maybe it's because you aren't quite sure what estate planning is really all about, or maybe you don't know where to turn for advice. Well, here's a suggestion. Make a call to Carmen Cercone of the Householder Group. His specialty is trust planning with an emphasis on estate preservation and tax reduction, and he's been doing it successfully in the Valley for over 24 years. Let Carmen Cercone put that kind of experience to work for you. Right now, he's offering a complimentary estate and retirement analysis just for calling him at 480-556-9600. That's 480-556-9600. For greater convenience, Mr. Cercone has offices at 7th Street in Missouri and Phoenix, and at 87th and in Via Ventura at the 101 in Scottsdale. Call for your complimentary appointment first thing tomorrow at 480-556-9600. Mr. Cercone is a registered representative offering securities through Sun America Securities, a member NASD, SIPC, and a wholly owned subsidiary broker-dealer of American International Group Incorporated.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on News Talk 960, The Patriot, KKNT. To join in the conversation, call in anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Now, back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf. We're having a lively conversation with Israeli Oz Rosenberg and author Devin Sper in studio today. Again, the call-in numbers, since this is a live call-in show, local 602-508-0960. Toll-free anywhere in the United States or Canada, 1-888-960-9696. We do welcome your calls throughout this show. We were talking about my question of what right do people outside of Israel have to criticize the actions of the Israeli government. I mean, I'm not living there. Devin, you're not living there. But, of course, Oz, you are living there. So, Oz, why don't you go ahead and respond to that question?
Well, I think we got to divide it to people outside Israel who are Jews or pro-Israel and others that are not. Because for me, living in Israel, we get the feeling, and people who are against the disengagement who live in Israel get the feeling that, of course, they don't have anybody to talk to inside the government. I mean, disengagement-wise, and so they have to have some support. And we in Israel really feel that people who are pro-Israel outside the country are really helpful. I mean, every little thing that may not seem like it's a counted one is really helpful for people who, because we feel helpless. You know, the government is doing stuff that are taking actions that are against what we feel, and we don't have anyone to turn to in that sense. So so that is the part where outside Jews outside Israel.
Okay, thank you. And Devin, I'm going to ask you to jump in there because Oz just brought up an interesting point. Now, where else do the people have to turn except for people outside of Israel? Now, it's my understanding Ariel Sharon campaigned against the Labor candidate who was in favor of withdrawal. Ariel Sharon, when he was campaigning, was strictly against withdrawal. Now he has gotten into power. He has changed 180 degrees. He's taken the position of his defeated opponent. Can you tell us what's going on, Devin?
Yeah, there are a lot of people scratching their head about that. And I think there are two basic reasons for that. The first is that Ariel Sharon and the Israeli right in general have no long-term vision of where they're going. And in absence of vision, the vision of the enemy becomes the default starting position for every negotiation. And by the way, when I say the vision of the enemy, that is one and the same with the vision of the Israeli left. So the difference between those two things, I certainly don't know what it is. They're both interested in the creation of a Palestinian state where there used to be Israel. Sorry, and you asked another question.
Yeah, I was just asking about Sharon running on the position of being against disengagement, and now he changes.
Yes, and I wanted to say the second reason for that, which is more sinister, I'm afraid, is simply the corruption of the Israeli body politic. Those who have observed Israel carefully over the last 20 years, over the last 10 years, especially since Oslo, have invariably seen a real corruption of the Israeli system of government. It has never been perfect. There was always the question of the corruption of power, but you've had flat-out monetary corruption. Yitzhak Rabin was thrown out of office the first time because he simply was in violation of his own currency laws. Ariel Sharon's son has just been indicted for financial manipulations connected to his campaign. I believe that there is a direct connection between this sort of corruption and the irrational policies that they follow. And the mechanism is this. The United States gives $3 billion a year to the people in power in Israel, and they use it as they see fit. They don't put that money in their pocket, but what they do is they create jobs and ministries for their friends. They have the ability with that money to hand out power, and there is the implicit string attached that they do the will of the American government. And so there is now one hand washing the other, where they A, have no vision, and B, have a personal interest in perpetuating this hoax of a peace process.
Okay, Oz, I'm going to let you jump in a second. However, we do have a long-distance caller, Lenore, calling from Chicago. Go ahead, you're on the air.
I was just wondering if there were any major Jewish organizations in this country, in the United States, that have any influence or have created any pressure to the Israeli government in order to prevent this giving away of land. I don't know what the tenor of opinion of all these organizations are, but is there any Jewish organizations that are using influence in order on this particular problem?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Now, let's talk first about AIPAC. Now, AIPAC, of course, Israel lobby, has fully supported the Israeli government's expulsion, and apparently they walk in lockstep with the Israeli government. They're not going to take a contrary opinion. What do you have to say about that, Devin?
AIPAC and generally the American Jewish establishment support Israel up and down the line, and in some cases that may be a mistake. I think they have to take a moral position if they're going to retain their credibility. But there are exceptions. For example, the Zionist Organization of America does not support this. And I would like to say to Lenore that there are very important friends of Israel outside the Jewish community who don't support it. For example, the evangelical churches, which is the largest and fastest growing Christian denomination, one of President Bush's main supporters, and they have asked President Bush to cut off aid to Israel because of this. So you're not going to win any friends among your enemies like Hamas, and you're actually losing your best supporters.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Hamas is not going to love Israel anymore because she threw these 8,000 Jews out of Gaza. On the contrary, whets their appetite for more. But your friends are hard-pressed now to defend a government which is itself undermining the existence of the state.
And contrary to loving Israel, they're just going to be emboldened to continue on with the terrorism. Okay, we are coming up on break. I'm going to let Oz Rosenberg jump in as soon as we get off the break here. You're listening to Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf. The show is available to you every Sunday, noon to 1 o'clock, here on News Talk 960 The Patriot. And I again ask you to please utilize the services of my advertisers and tell them that you heard about them on this program. That is how the show is brought to you. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Carlos
Whenever I pass the corner of 7th Street in Maryland, it's hard to resist making a quick stop at the Maryland Deli and Mini Mart. If I need a cup of coffee, it's always fresh. If I'm in the mood for iced tea, they serve the best China Mist. If I'm hungry, they make the freshest deli sandwiches around with boar's head meats, of course. For a quick treat, they've got Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Need gas? Use your Shell card or their ATM. Open 7 days a week from 5 to 11. The place is always clean and attractive. Seems like there are mini marts on every corner, but there's only one Maryland Deli and Mini Mart, corner of 7th Street in Maryland.
If you're looking for a complete quality computer service company that is knowledgeable, reliable, professional, and fast, you need Ultimate Computer Concepts of Phoenix. We offer service and support for all of your computer needs, and we've been serving the Valley for over 10 years, specializing in computer systems and software, internet service, security, networking, and website hosting and development. Call 602-230-4747 or visit us online at uccinc.net.
Jewish News of Greater Phoenix is your source for timely news and information about the Jewish community in the Valley and around the world. Our family-owned and operated weekly newspaper has been serving Valley readers for 57 years. To subscribe to Jewish News, call 602-870-9470 or visit www.jewishaz.com. That number again is 602-870-9470 or jewishaz.com. As an attorney, I get to know who the experts are in every related field. That's how I came to know Dr. Roger Baker. Dr. Baker is a board-certified chiropractic physician who handles accident injuries. His modern office provides every form of up-to-date healing and pain-relieving therapy, including acupuncture for pain relief and digestion aid. Dr. Baker stays on top of what's new so that his patients have the latest advances in care. Take it from me, you're in the right hands with Dr. Roger Baker. That's Dr. Roger Baker, 602-249-4508.
You're listening to the Middle East Radio Forum on News Talk 960, The Patriot, KKNT. To join in the conversation, call in anytime at 602-508-0960. That's 602-508-0960. Now, back to your host, Attorney William J. Wolf.
Welcome back to today's final segment of Middle East Radio Forum. My name is William Wolf. In studio today, I have guests Oz Rosenberg, a young Israeli who is here following military service, and also Devin Sper, author of a wonderful book called The Future of Israel. And again, the website, Middle East Radio Forum, will allow you to listen to the show anywhere in the world, and also will allow you to listen to probably 30 or 40 of the old shows in the archive section. So if you've ever missed a show or you'd like to listen to a show again, that's how you do it. Before we get to Oz, I wanted him to respond to the question about corruption in the Israeli government. I've got to take a call from Eddie calling from Cave Creek. Go ahead, please. You're on the air.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Devin, please. I have a comment first.
All right, please make it brief, though. We're short on time.
You betcha. 1776 in this country, a bunch of outrageous people got together to form a constitution while they fought over their own beliefs. Right now in Iraq, a bunch of outrageous people are fighting over their own beliefs to form a constitution. Devin, are you looking for a bunch of outrageous people to bring Israel back to a form of government that's for the people?
Good question. Go ahead, Devin.
Well, there's, of course, nothing outrageous about it, but you're quite right, Eddie. What Israel needs, first of all, is a constitution. The fact that you could throw people out of their homes would obviously be unconstitutional in this country, but as Israel has no constitution, you can pass any sort of law. That is one of the fundamental things, along with declaring their borders, taking their sovereignty seriously, and creating a new system of representative government that they have to do in order to straighten themselves out.
Okay, thanks for your call, Eddie. Quickly, we've got to go to Warren calling from Phoenix. Go ahead, you're on the air. Warren, are you there?
Yes.
Go ahead, please. You're on the air.
I was just curious on the tactics that the Israelis are using. I didn't know maybe that they're just trying to rope dope type of deal.
A rope-a-dope, where they're
they just bring in their people and make the concession, and then when Hamas or whoever the terrorists are attack, that they can then proceed how they want.
Okay, that's the first time Muhammad Ali's been brought on this program. I appreciate the question. Go ahead, Devin.
Well, that's similar to the first question we got from Bill, where because this thing seems so illogical, Warren rationally concludes that they must have some logic behind it. But Warren, this has been going on for 30 years, where Israel is irrationally giving away territory. She has got nothing but missiles and suicide bombs in return. And in absence of any evidence to the contrary, we have to conclude that they still don't know what they're doing.
Okay, thanks for your call, Warren. Okay, Oz, I promised I'd get back to you. We were talking before the last break about corruption in the Israeli body politic, and I told you I'd give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, Devin, you mentioned before the corruption in Israeli government, and I just wanted to say, many you'd find many left wings in Israel who would say about Ariel Sharon's propaganda that. On his opening speech after he got elected, he said, "Tiyu mukhanim leviturim kovim," which means be prepared for very hurtful giving ups about territories.
Painful concessions.
All right, that's a better translation. Anyway, and they would claim, come on, he said it. He said it just after he got elected. But the thing is, it was after he got elected, and many people think in Israel that. One of the reasons the disengagement happened was because of all the Greek island issue, which was related to the Sharon family corruption. And the thing is, in Israel, unfortunately, a lot of corruption going on in Israel is being fed because of the government's corruption. For example, there is the mayor of Ra'anana, Uzi Cohen. If he can take the police minister connections to in order to help his own brother, or in the electricity company, which is a governmental now. There is it's in Chain in Dimona. There is 18 people from the same family. So this corruption goes all the way to the smallest clerk, and. For me, I think it's being fed because of the government corruption. I mean, if you see someone high above you who is corrupted, why won't you do it yourself? So,
okay, that's an interesting comment. I'm going to ask you, Devin, do you feel that Ariel Sharon is willing to throw Israel away for his own personal corruption or his own personal benefit?
No, absolutely not. I think the dynamic is this. A person has no real plan. He is encouraged by Perez, who he needs for his majority to go in a certain direction. He's patted on the back by the Americans and the entire world and praised to the sky by the press. His only opposition is his own people who have no power over him because it's not a truly representative government. And so a man like Sharon rationalizes to himself that what he is doing is for the good of the country. That's the way that sort of thing works.
Okay. Let's talk about the expulsion from Gaza. Do you feel that at least that's going to win Israel any points in the court of world opinion?
Well, if we look back at the last 30 years of Land for Peace, that would not be the case. That was one of the premises underlying Oslo, that if nothing else, the world would like us. And in fact, Israel's stock in the world has never been lower than it is right now. And the reason for that is that if you seem unsure of yourself and your rights, then nobody else is going to be sure. As Hillel said, Im eina nili mili, if I'm not for myself, who will be? If Israel is willing to challenge her own sovereignty on pieces of her territory, why should we expect that anyone else will support it? So unfortunately, the history of the last 30 years proves otherwise.
I get the feeling you'd like to get the Israeli Knesset all together in one room where they had to pay attention to you, and perhaps you'd like to collectively shake their shoulders and tell them what they're doing is just crazy.
Well, I just was in the Knesset. I spoke to 6 or 7 Knesset members personally, and what was very interesting is that although this was in the middle of the Gaza disengagement and they were very preoccupied, they sat and they listened to me. And that tells you that there is a great vacuum of alternative ideas in Israel. And in my opinion, it is this vacuum of alternatives to the peace process that is the reason we keep pursuing a policy which has so obviously failed.
Well, then how do we go about filling this vacuum for them? It seems like they need our help.
That's right. And as Oz said, they do need our help. They deserve our help. Israel purports to be the country of the entire Jewish people, and we therefore also have the right to give them our input. And as far as I'm concerned, and I think as far as you're concerned, Bill, we're going to do this as long as there's breath in our body.
Okay. Let's go quickly to Talia from Levine. Go ahead, please. You're on the air.
Hi. What I wanted to say is that he talks, I don't know the name of the author. He talks
that's Devin Sper. He's the author.
Devin, yeah. He talks much about the corruption in Israel, and this really upset me specifically when he mentioned Rabin. I think that Rabin was the most modest person ever. And this kind of people that came, hardworking people, we can rarely find them anymore. So when he connected him with corruption, it upset me. Regarding Sharon, when he became president, I was really upset because I am for peace. Now that he is giving land back for peace, I am happy that he is the president. I think we need to go. We need to pass this stage when we show the world that we are doing everything for peace.
You think the Israelis have a partner in this peace process in the Arabs? Do you feel that they're
No, I don't trust the Arabs at all. Don't.
Okay. Well, I'm going to let
understand me. I don't trust them.
Okay, I'm going to let's let Devin answer so far, and then we'll leave you on the line in case there's a follow-up. Devin, go ahead.
Talia, was it? Talia.
Yes.
If you recall, Prime Minister Rabin was thrown out of office by the Supreme Court of Israel in his first time because he had violated his own currency laws. I was an immigrant in Israel at that time, and although I brought in dollars into the country, was not allowed to keep them in dollars, but had to immediately change them into shekels, into lira, which were devalued at 800% inflation.
This was something absolutely minor, and see how the government of
in
Israel
the United
is
States,
honest
Talia, I'm going to let you respond, but please let Devin finish his response to you, and then I'll give you a chance.
In the United States, we don't consider anybody above the law. We don't consider it a minor thing when somebody passes a law and then violates that law as if the law applies to everyone else but not them. It doesn't matter what the figure was. If it was $1, the principle is that Rabin, along with Avraham Ofer, who was the housing minister in his government, who was also involved in corruption, in fact, shot himself over it. Rabin was corrupt. Now it's true that Rabin and Sharon were heroes. They were people who did a lot for Israel. But as you see, even people going into the political system in Israel, good people like Yitzhak Rabin, came out in the end corrupt. That's simply the reality. And you can minimize what Rabin did, but the Supreme Court of Israel felt otherwise.
Okay, Talia, I told you to get a chance. Go ahead, and then I'm going to ask Oz to jump in.
I absolutely disagree with you. I think that it shows how the honesty in Israel is important. If you remember, when we had Miriam Eshkol, the wife of President Eshkol, when she came to the United States and he bought with government money, she bought a hat, and it was a big issue in Israel also. Here you see the country go to a war with Iraq, America go to a war with Iraq, and all the corruption that there is. I forgot this company that belonged to Cheney, or he is involved with this that has to do with billions and billions.
Okay, well, I've got to give I hate to interrupt you, but I have to give Devin a chance to respond because we're running out of time. Go ahead, Devin.
Talia, your example is a good one. The wife of Eshkol was criticized for buying a hat. That's how Israel used to be. The way of corruption is that it spreads. Sin spreads and eventually infects the society until you look like Mexico or countries where nothing works. You would not today be thrown out of power because of the hat, and you would not have the scandal that Eshkol had. You have a prime minister who's buying not a hat, but an island on public money, and it's not even an issue in Israel.
Okay, Oz, go ahead. Your turn.
I just wanted to talk about the Yitzhak Rabin issue. I think most of the Israeli society agrees that Yitzhak Rabin was a great person and did a lot to Israel, was a general, and did a lot in politics either. But a lot of people are getting emotionally because of the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin and putting him on a pedestal, and forgetting what happened. I mean, even months before he was assassinated, forgetting all the terrorist attacks that happened before he was. the 18 buses in two 18 buses in Jerusalem, and the 5 line in Tel Aviv, and a lot of others, and that alone, the assassination thing, which is a very emotional thing, I agree, but is kind of making a lot of people in Israel, making them giving them a blur sight, and not a lucid one about what really happened in Yitzhak Rabin's life and his actions.
Okay, Talia, I'll give you one last shot to be very brief in response.
Well, I see that we are not getting out of it, so it's different opinion completely.
Okay.
I still think that he was a modest man, and it's not at all the picture
That's
that
not
Devin showed. But I would like to ask Devin if he can
Quickly,
say what is the size of Israel compared to all the Arab countries, the land of Israel compared to what the land of the other countries are.
Okay. Thank you, Talia, for your call.
Thank you.
It's hard to answer that question because Israel, no one knows where the borders of Israel are. If you're talking about the current border, the pre-67 border, but I don't think it adds up to 1%.
And in any event, it's extremely tiny.
It's very small
percentage of what the Arabs have. Okay, again, thanks for your call, Talia. Okay, Oz, I told you I would, give you another shot. Go ahead. Okay, let's just go on then. All right, what do you think the long-term consequences to Israel are going to be at this point, Devin?
Well, we've talked about the long-term. Okay, well, the long-term consequences to Israel politically, first of all. We talked about militarily. We said that the government of Israel has openly stated that they're going to continue this policy of ethnic cleansing until basically the enemy is happy, and that means that they're going to have to get rid of 250,000 Jews in the West Bank. They're going to have to get rid of another few 100,000 in East Jerusalem. The next stage will be that the Palestinians will demand a return to the 1947 partition lines, and they will have the support of the Israeli Arabs in that demand. And so this is a never-ending process. Basically, this is the beginning of the end of Zionism, as the head of Hamas correctly stated just last week. That doesn't mean that they can't turn aside from it, but this is a path to self-destruction, and very quickly in our lifetime, I'm sorry to say, this will be the beginning of the end of the state.
All right, Oz, go ahead.
I just want to say that I agree with Devin, because what's the difference between Gaza Strip and Tel Aviv in that matter? Because who said how many years you have to go back until it expires, the so-called occupation?
Well, of course, if we want to go back far enough, it was all Israeli land. It was obviously destroyed by the Romans, finishing with the Second Temple in 70 CE. But in any event, let's go on. We're almost to the end of the show. I do want to talk about spiritual consequences to the Jewish people. Devin, you're going to have to be very brief. Go ahead, please.
I think that's the most important question that we discussed today, because above and beyond the awful military consequences, above and beyond the political consequences, the most important thing is that we have had a slogan in Israel, those who oppose this expulsion, that Jews do not expel Jews. Well, it turns out that they do. And this is something from which we can never recover. You can recover when an enemy overwhelms you if you remain true to your principles. There is no recovery from destruction you do to yourself, and I dare say that God cannot forgive the Jewish people for destroying themselves. He can save us from any enemies, from any force, but if we decide to destroy ourselves, there is nothing even God can do.
Okay, we're coming up on the end of the show. I'd like to thank Oz Rosenberg from B'nai Brak, Israel, and also Devin Sper, author of a wonderful book, The Future of Israel. I highly recommend that anybody who's interested in the subject get a copy of the book. My name is William Wolf. This is Middle East Radio Forum. The show is available to you every Sunday, noon to 1 o'clock Arizona time. Next week, historian Dr. Steve Carroll will be back to talk about the Palestinians Part 8, the 1974 Rabat Summit, and an analysis of the PLO Covenant. He's always a great guest. I know you want to listen to the show. And again, if you happen to miss any show, you can catch it on the website in the archives, middleeastradioforum.org. I hope you're using the website for that purpose. That's why it's there for you. I'd like to thank you again for listening. I hope you can listen again next week and into the future. This is, again, Middle East Radio Forum, noon to 1 o'clock every Sunday, Arizona time. 3 p.m. on the East Coast and 10 o'clock in the Middle East. Please spread the word about the show, and